Well, good morning or good afternoon, rather, and thank you so much for joining us today. So we're having today's press conference to continue our commitment to the very important issues surrounding domestic violence. We know that it is the prevalency rates of domestic violence continues to grow in our respective communities and most certainly in our state. And so we are here today to reaffirm our commitment to protecting victims of domestic violence and preventing intimate partner homicide. And so today's announcement is in that same spirit of strengthening a proven evidence based strategy that saves lives, and that is lethality assessments. I want to thank all of my legislative colleagues that are here today, especially Assemblymember Sarah Clark, who is the sponsor of this bill in the Assembly. I want to thank you, Assemblymember Clark, for not only your advocacy, but your unapologetic commitment to ensuring that victims are protected and that lives are saved. We are also joined today by another strong advocate, and some people may be familiar with this particular advocate, Joseph Petito, whose tireless advocacy in the wake of an unspeakable loss that no family should ever experience, but unfortunately does happen, and was brought to our nation's attention the urgent need for stronger protection for domestic violence survivors. I am grateful to Joe and your family and the Gabby Petito Foundation for your tireless advocacy and calling out the disparities that exist and the resources that are needed to support domestic violence victims, also missing women and girls, and lifting up the disparities that exist when it comes to addressing BIPOC missing and murdered women and girls. Your voice most certainly reminds us that every statistic is connected to a human life, someone who has family, friends, and most of all is a valued member of our respective communities. So why this matters. Domestic violence, as I said earlier, continues to remain a threat. Homicide is the second leading cause of death for African American women aged 15 to 34, and the fourth leading cause of death for all women in the US. Each year, approximately 1,000 women are killed by intimate partners, and in 75% of these cases, the murder occurs after the relationship has ended. Yet, only 4% of these victims had contacted a shelter or a hotline in the year before they were killed. And this is why this legislation is so important, because this helps to bridge that gap. Lethality assessments have proven time and time again that they do just that. They provide access to prevention and resources for victims of domestic violence. Currently, law enforcement, when they respond to these calls, they complete something what's called a domestic incident report, or DIR, for every domestic violence call, regardless if there's an arrest. This new legislation would require officers to complete a lethality assessment screen alongside the DIR. My colleagues who are here today also represent counties like my home county of Broome County that currently provide those lethality assessments. So that's Broome County, also Dutchess County, and Westchester County. This legislation would make this a statewide assessment that is done. These assessments include a series of evidence-based questions that help identify victims at high risk of serious harm or death. Topics include threats to kill, use or access to weapons, history of strangulation, escalating violence, control or coercive behavior. If the screening indicates danger, officers are required to inform the victim of their elevated risk, but also they go a step further. They connect victims to resources right in their communities or the surrounding areas to assist them. So whether that is the New York State Domestic and Sexual Violence Hotline, and I want to thank our partners in the Office for the Prevention of Domestic Violence for their hard work in providing access to these resources. Also, Officers can refer victims to local domestic violence service providers and can consider filing what's called an extreme risk protection order if weapons are involved. And as I mentioned before, it works. There are several states who have engaged in utilizing these assessments. And according to a study in the Journal of Economic Behavior and Organization, lethality assessments reduce female homicides by male partners by 40%. The biggest reduction occurs in homicide of girlfriends who often face high risk but lack legal protections like married victims may have. The other important piece to this lethality assessment tool is that it empowers victims and helps them in safety planning. And so I know some of my colleagues will speak to this further, this piece with respect to safety planning, but it is so critical and imperative that victims even know what resources are available to them and that there are alternatives, that they don't have to stay in these very violent and unsafe conditions. The other piece I want to lift up again, as I mentioned, there are several other states that already do this lethality assessment statewide, including states like Florida and Utah. They recently joined in providing lethality assessments. In New York, most certainly can and should join in this effort as a state that is a leader in policy and most certainly in a leader as we continue to push for more resources in the public protection space. This legislation is common sense legislation. It is evidence driven and it is empowering. And so in that same spirit, I want to call up my assembly sponsor on this bill to further underscore why this bill is important and will continue to push for this bill to be passed in the assembly. We did pass it this session, actually a few weeks ago in the Senate. And so now we need to bring it home, literally and figuratively, in the assembly. So please join me in welcoming my assembly sponsor on this bill, Assembly Member Sarah Clark.